He went from catching passes in the NFL to standing on top of Mount Everest and becoming the first NFL player to complete the 7 summits. It's Mr. Mark Pattison, the man, the myth, the legend, and he has also helped take Sports Illustrated from number 17 to number 1, and he's earned an Emmy along the way. It's like the ideal human being you ever could meet. We're here on the Marketer of the Day podcast with Robert Plank, brought to you by dfypodcast.com. We handle the podcast backend editing, publishing, and promotion, so you can focus on the interview. And the interview that we're talking about today is this man who has accomplished some very difficult feats. When you think about people, they think about like the hardest thing they've ever done in their life, what they'll be known for. I mean, climbing one mountain, I think, is hard enough, let alone the 7 toughest mountains in the world, the 7 summits. So if you're someone that maybe secretly struggles after reaching a major goal, losing your sense of purpose, just need help navigating all of that, etc., then we're here with the author of Finding Your Summit, How to Build Resilience and Faith to Rise Above Life Challenges. He's a former NFL wide receiver, Emmy Award-winning storyteller. He'll tell you all about himself. Mr. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Happy to have you. And so what are you all about? Like where to even begin, and how do you get to be so crazy in a good way to accomplish all these things?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think everything, you don't set out when you're a little kid and say, I'm going to experience all these things. I think every single one of these bits that you just talked about, between Sports Illustrated, which has nothing to do with winning an Emmy, which kind of has nothing really to do with climbing mountains, especially Mount Everest, which really has nothing to do with the NFL. But I think there's one common through line, which I learned a long time ago. And I didn't really get exposed to this till I got into college, right? I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and I was just like every other kid out there. And I happened to be really talented in sports. I had never really worked at that. And that was like a big awakening when I first got to the University of Washington and realized that everybody else out there were like big and strong and fast and confident. And I just had to like get on board with what it was going to take to do that. And then that kind of led to now my first year, I'm in the Rose Bowl. My second year, I'm in the Rose Bowl. And now I'm playing in big stadiums, and you're really starting to understand what like big business is. And then when I get drafted by the Raiders, it's just like that's serious big business in the NFL, and people are driving up in their Porsches. And, we have all these celebrities, because I was down in LA with the LA Raiders at the time. And so again, it just kept expanding my mind on what things could be. Like there is no impossible. I've actually have kind of coined my life making the impossible possible, because I think so many times that we put limitations on what we can do, or we don't think big enough. And those to me have become this thing called BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals. And it's something that when I was talking to on my podcast, Finding Your Summit, I was talking to the founder of Expedia and Zillow, and he was telling me, like, how do you come up with these ideas like that? And it's exactly more or less the same question that you just had for me, which is, how do I really elevate myself? Like things that like I'm going to Mars, like you would never even imagine. And yet these are certain things that I just get really excited about. And, they've also come at different points in time in my life when I wasn't going after the trophy. I was just going after a challenge, which at the time it was playing football and then climbing mountains and building companies and things like that all have, ultimately had a successful path because I've used a certain system.
Ooh, well, I'm curious to know what that system is, but I love this idea of seeking productive difficulty and rising to the challenge and working backwards, right? You say, well, what do I want to do? I want to be in the NFL, and that's maybe like a box on the sheet of paper there, and I point an arrow there, and what's the box that comes before that and before that? And I want to go to Mars or work at Sports Illustrated. It's like, well, what's the end point? And then what's the path to success? What do I need to accomplish to get there? And, you say that some of these things are like, there's no such thing as impossible, but I hear a lot about, and I know firsthand nothing of this idea of like sports, right? And like, if you're in high school and you're like good at football, that's one thing. And then you get to college and you're like the worst candidate there. And even if you're great in college, if you get in pro sports, you're like the worst there. Like there's people that their talent is just far in surpassing of you. And so how do you navigate that? Because like, I mean, there's some people that no matter what they do, they don't make the team. So I mean, how do you
Uh,
accomplish these great things? What's the
well,
system?
yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of stuff in there. I mean, I think number one, you can't worry about anybody else. Like when I'm out there playing, and everything you just said is true. And I ultimately had a ceiling. I mean, there is no greatest, the greatest of the greatest. I mean, there's a lot of great players that are out there, but you can only control what you can control. Which for me, especially when we're talking about the NFL now, was just being the best version of myself and showing up. And you got to think about it from the coach's standpoint too. You know, they're not only looking for great players, but they're also looking for consistency and people that you can depend on, just no different from any job that you're out there. Is this person going to show up? Are they going to do their job? And are they going to exceed expectations? Because if they don't in the NFL, those coaches get fired, right? If they get a bunch of guys who are out partying all night long, they don't show up, and then when they call, 1, 2, 3 hike, they're offsides or they're running the wrong play, and so you can't actually execute and ultimately get to that championship. And so that's kind of one big piece of it. I think there's another second piece to this, which is because everybody has to be motivated or inspired. I'm not sure which word you want to use there, but when you can take either one, it really doesn't matter. At some point in time, the theme song from Rocky like wears off, right? And so how do you keep going? And how I've found, and part of my system has been this routine, this daily routine of consistency. And when I talk about consistency, I'm talking about doesn't matter what time zone I'm in. I'm up at a certain time in the morning, which is about 5:30, and I'm out the door. And I go for an hour and a half workout, and then I come back and I go for another hour and a half in the afternoon. And I have never, and this is we're talking like 7 days a week, year round, 365 days a year. And I have found like that consistency, not only from the health standpoint of that has enabled me to continue to climb mountains, but also from the mental clarity and knowing that even though that I might be down, because if in a pyramid like this, there's the pinnacle that everybody's trying to achieve, and everybody wants to be the star, and everybody wants to win the trophy. But you have to start down here and go through these building blocks. I call it the pyramid of success, right? And that pyramid of success is really just executing all these different things, but it starts with consistency. And you have to also embrace discomfort. I mean, hard things are hard. If hard things were easy, everybody would do it. It's easy to sit on the couch. It's easy to have, popcorn and, not watch your diet and health and everything else. But if you truly want to be at that pinnacle, which I have, it's come with sacrifice. But I also look at that, what a great, phenomenal opportunity I have to get up and get after it. And how can I improve today to make me better for tomorrow?
Very good. That all of that's helpful. Just this idea that we have to create our own motivation and say, well, it's not that I have to do this thing, I get to do this. And the almost like military discipline of saying, well, I could cop out and I could do all these easy things, but look at what I'm looking to accomplish. And that there's talent, but there's also consistency, right? There's multiple factors. And if we have this foundation that you speak of, then we can like set ourselves up for success. You wake up early, the same time, you have your exercise routine, and it's like, well, that doesn't like there's still other work to be done and problems to be solved, but without that foundation, it's like you're almost guaranteed to fail. So at least that first step, you set up that foundation and you achieve success. And so out of all these things that you've done, like the NFL, the Everest, and all that, I mean, I can only imagine like the scary moments, right? You hear about people, you see pictures of like these climbers, they're sleeping in a hammock on the side of a mountain. They weather a blizzard for 3 days straight. I mean, are there any scary moments you feel like sharing about this?
I've got a lot of scary moments, and there's a lot of scary moments on those mountains, where people fall in a crevasse. I fell in a crevasse. I fell backwards, upside down, landed on my head on Everest, and it's like, look, when you're playing in the NFL, it's terrifying to go as a wide receiver to go across the center. And a guy I used to run up against quite a bit was Ronnie Lott because we were in the NFC West together. It was the Saints, it was the Falcons, it was the Rams and the 49ers. And we'd go out to San Francisco, or San Francisco would come to New Orleans every year when we play them. And, to go across and knowing that you're going to be hit by a freight train is scary, right? And you got to catch the ball, by the way. And so that's terrifying, but you don't die on the mountain, or I'm sorry, on the field. typically. I mean, there have been cases, I guess, once one or two, of like heat fatigue or something from a high school player in Texas. But generally speaking, you're not going to die when you're out playing football. You might get hurt very bad, but on the mountains, you've got Mother Nature you're contending with. So, you're talking about when I was at Camp 3 on Everest, I was caught in a cyclone blowing 75 miles per hour, stuck on a 35-degree slant slope, and you couldn't do anything but just stay in your tent, in your sleeping bag. And that's hard. That is mentally flipping hard to stay in there and not want to give up and go back down when you're in that situation. But it's like all these things that storms do pass, and you just got to take the moment for what the moment is, and then deal with it, and then keep going. Another super scary moment for me was on the Matterhorn. Right, this is post Everest and post the Seven Summits. And if anybody who's ever been to Disneyland, they have the Matterhorn ride, right? The
Oh yeah.
steepest, scariest thing that you go in and out of the mountain. And
Yeah.
scaling up the side of this like Batman was flipping scary. And as a matter of fact, in 2022, I went to go do it, and they'd had a kind of a late or early snowfall and freezing. It was high winds and everything else. And so I went up to the guy and said, I really want to do this. I'm here. I'm committed. I want to go up the Matterhorn. This is the guy that kind of controls who goes up and goes down. And I go, what are my chances of going up? And he goes, it's 100% chance you'll die. So I said, all right. So I went down to Chamonix in France and climbed Mont Blanc. And then came back the next year in 2023. And I had that time to think about it. I studied it. I watched film on it. I'm talking about YouTube, of like how you really attack this thing. And this is really a metaphor for life, is rather than think about the Matterhorn as this big scary rock, which it is, all I focused on is what was right in front of me as I was going up this gigantic piece of rock. And in some cases you're inverted and you're just hanging there totally exposed. And it's terrifying. But by only really focusing on what was in front of me, not the entirety or I'd fall, really helped me get through. And it's also helped me, that same kind of mentality, get through life.
Yeah. Yeah, one day at a time, right? One step at a time. And it's like, otherwise you're overwhelmed. And even like this podcast we're doing right now, if I was thinking about what I'm doing tomorrow or in 2 hours, I wouldn't be focused in the moment. I would not be at my best, and I would be artificially overwhelmed. So that's a huge lesson, right? Just that we need to focus on that problem right there in front of us. And that way we can then focus on the next problem, the next. And so every now, like, I'm not real knowledgeable in like rock climbing or like self-development, but sometimes you come across guys that they're mountain climbers or et cetera, and because they've accomplished these physical feats and the mental resilience, they have a lot to say. They're kind of like self-help gurus, so to speak.
Yeah.
But as far as like people like that, like the kind of self-help rock climbers, do you have any hot takes, or is there anyone like that kind of like rubs you the wrong way, or just, some of these self-help guys, do they get it wrong sometimes?
I think as long as you're being, it's authentic. That's what I'm all about. And
Yeah.
there's a guy that was in that I actually met, and he used to be like a big rock star in Nepal. He was like in the Nepal. Um, it'd be similar to what our Navy SEALs are here in the U.S. And so he'd gone through all that, and then he went and climbed these crazy mountains. And he's been up Everest a bunch of times as a climbing. And there's a big story that came out about 2 years ago that he was out there and taking advantage of girls, at remote spots high in the mountains where he'd climb in these tents and do not appropriate things, to so obviously people like that I don't respect, because they're not taking the sport and people and they're where they're at, they're not respecting that. But there's a lot of guys out there that I've mad respect for. I've got a guy here in town at Beasters who's climbed all these crazy mountains. I've got mad respect for Jimmy Chin and those guys who have really gotten after it. The guy that's kind of the hot climber out there right now. Spacing on his name, but he's the guy that did the Free Solo movie, and he's just all about the love of the game, and that's what I'm into. Like people who just have an authentic love of the game, and they're doing it not for the trophy, like you were talking about before. I ended up winning this Best Picture trophy, Emmy. Like it's almost impossible to do, right?
Whoa. Yeah.
Right. I'm not an actor. I don't know nothing about it. As a matter of fact, when I got a call from the NFL in 2022 and said, "Hey, guess what? Great news! You've just been nominated for Best Cinematography and Best Picture." I ended up winning Best Picture, but I said, for what? I had no clue what they were even talking about. This is after we had shot this movie the year before when I was on Mount Everest. And I'd done most of the shooting of it. Like, I had no clue. I had no correlation, like, because I didn't even care about that. I still don't care about it. I mean, it's really cool. And
Yeah.
it's kind of, but it's not like, you know, eh, like again, my love of football, I would have, I mean, I'm glad I didn't, but I would have played for free. I loved it that much, right? I wasn't out there for the paycheck. That was just a benefit, a side benefit. This trophy I got was a side benefit and bonus that I got for the
Hmm.
love of the game, of what we were able to accomplish. And this really awesome film that the NFL Films, co-produced with me. And so, again, I think that's when success starts to come, is that you're doing things not for the monetary value, not for the reward, not for the ribbon, but because you actually love doing it. And back to your question, those are the guys that I respect, that are out there doing it, because like me, I get up there every single day. Most of the time I'm by myself. 99% of the time I'm by myself climbing. There's no cameras, there's no reporters, it's just because I know that not only what I love, but that's what's going to help me get better.
Ooh, I love it. Well, you give us a lot of interesting questions to ask ourselves, right? There's like there one is like, well, there's bad wherever you go, right? Any situation, but you say, well, who can I have in my inner circle who I respect, who challenge me, who I want to be like, who have my similar values, like who are my friends? And then you also we ask these questions of like, what would I do for free? So that way my internal drive pushes me, and so that way I can get to that life fulfillment, because life is so short. And so this and I'm you and I are just some random guys that met each other on LinkedIn, and then I looked into you and watched your podcast, and first thing I see is David Meltzer, who's like a household name in some places, and he's like nervous to be on your show, and I'm like, whoa, who
Mhm.
is this celebrity type of guy? So I have to know, like, that Emmy. I knew nothing about that. So what's this movie? How did you win an Emmy?
Yeah, so in 20, well, first of all, I was supposed to climb Mount Everest in 2020, but when you typically go to Nepal and you like start going in that direction, it happens in late March. Well, if you go back to late March or even mid-March, the beginning of March, it was really mid-March of 2020. That's when COVID. And as you remember, the whole world remembers, every day was exponentially more intense than the day before. More
Oh
people
yeah.
were dying. Restaurants were shutting down. You could only buy so much toilet paper, right? It was crazy, right? It was a crazy time. So the whole world shuts down. So we took the Everest. I was supposed to leave. I brought my bags ready to LA, ready to board from LAX to Nepal. And so we took that expedition, and everybody was going to be on it, and as did everybody else. And we moved it to 2021. I mean, the whole mountain was shut down. Nepal shut it, closed it. So, um, so what uh, in January? So now this is, again, I go off to Nepal in late March of 2021, but in January 2021, I get a call randomly from the NFL, and they said, "Hey, Mark, this is so and so, and we'd love to come out to Sun Valley, and we're really interested in telling your story about climbing Mount Everest." And so, of course, I said yes. And so they flew out, and the film was originally going to be a super short film. Because of the way that they show it on NFL networks and NFL 360, the longest that they do is 30-minute. Same, that's considered a full length feature film for them, because of the commercial breaks and everything else that go in. So this is made, anything Emmy related has to go on TV or is on TV. So anyways, it started off that it was going to be relatively short, and it kept growing and growing and growing until ultimately there was such a deep, rich story there that they said, we're going to make this into full 30. And so they were going to go to Mount Everest with me. They couldn't, because there was still a COVID outbreak coming from India that particular year. So they equipped me with GoPros on my head and the shoulders and stuff. And so every single time I started climbing, I would just push, play, and I had no idea what I was shooting otherwise, because I was concentrating on the task at hand, which is climbing up this crazy mountain.
Yeah.
And at the end, I hand delivered all this film to them, and just say, here you go, like 10,000 hours of footage of me climbing up. So they had to go through every single thing that I filmed, and they pulled out these amazing, shots and everything. So that's one of the reasons why we got nominated for best cinematography. So anyways, the movie comes out. We ran it in a bunch of theaters. It was incredible. It is on YouTube. It's called Searching for the Summit. So if you want to look for that, Searching for the Summit. And then in 2022, as I mentioned, 2022 in like April, I get a call from the NFL and they go, "Hey, great news! You've been nominated, blah blah blah." And I go, "Well, what's that mean? For what?" And so they they tell me, and then I end up flying back to New York and Lincoln Center, and then they go to have the big announcement, and there's every category is 6 potential films, and we're one of 6, and we end up, like, they call my name, and like, it was a completely out of body experience. I'm up there in a sold out, every major broadcaster, ABC Sports, ESPN, Sports Illustrated. I mean, everybody's there, and Bob Costas and every major famous sports figure that you've ever heard of, ever seen on TV is out there. And now I'm up on stage holding this trophy, accepting this award for Best Picture, which is like, an Oscar Best Picture award. It was insane.
Man, yeah, your life is like a movie. It's fun to hear about it. I can't wait till the documentary or the dramatization where you have like Tom Hanks or Willem Dafoe or someone playing you, right, and just going through these adventures. It sounds like such a blast.
Trust me when I tell you, I'm full blown Forrest Gump. I mean, all these bits and pieces, and life is like a box of chocolates.
Well, very nice. Well, what's next for you? Because, like, I mean, after this, do you go down to the Marianas Trench? Do you go to space? Like, what's happening in the future?
Yeah, I'm thinking about Mars. I think that might be in there too. But I just got
Okay.
back. So last year, so I've done a bunch of since I've been back from Mount Everest, I've done the Matterhorn, the Eiger, Cotopaxi, the Grand Teton. Last year, I went and climbed in the Dolomites. I just got back from Montenegro. I actually did a leadership summit climb going up. I just got back. And so that's on the climbing part. Every year I climb, every day I climb here in Sun Valley, Idaho, which is where I live. So I have that already going. And so I'll come up with kind of my next bucket. This bucket was climbing in Montenegro. So, I'm out there keynote speaking. I just got done doing a TEDx. That was super fun in Dallas. I was in Montenegro as well speaking. So if anybody wants me to come out and, fire their group up with a lot of these stories that we're talking about right now, I'd love to do so. And there's all these life's lessons, like, mental resilience. I'm doing a thing for Harvard next week, which is just about that mental strength. How do you get through it? How do you build that, right? You're not just born with it. You got to build it. And there's certain, like, building blocks and secrets that I have and I've formed over these years from all these things I've been able to do that have really helped me, I think I've got a fairly deep basis or concept about what it takes to have strong mental strength. And so you can really deal with hard situations for anything that anybody's doing out there. So, that's out there. Like I said, I'll have another mountain to climb. And, I'm also, I left Sports Illustrated 6 months ago. So I'm looking at building my next media, a little empire here. So I continue to do the podcast. And, you mentioned this before, and I'll mention again, my book, Finding Your Summit, is out, and I just actually put it out on audible.com as well. So if anybody's interested, you can go to Amazon and buy the hard copy, or go to Audible and buy the Audible version of me speaking about my adventures.
Very amazing. You might be the most famous person I've ever met, Mr. Mark, and
Thank
you
you.
also have a lot of good things to say. And it seems like, at least this is my opinion, like we need a continuous supply of the advice and the positivity, right? You don't just learn some of these things once, because your brain plays tricks on you, you backslide, the mental muscle fatigue. So it's important to, like, some of this, the speaking, the TEDx, etc. It's important to kind of, like, stay studying on it, just like you'd study anything else, right? Like, imagine if you were looking into scaling Kilimanjaro or Everest or something like that, and then you said, okay, cool, I'm done studying, I'll take a year off and then I'll go climb. You'd be so rusty. But it's like, so many people do this, right? They don't take that morning routine seriously, or their goals, or their disciplines. So it's like just very much needed, the service you provide and the speaking you do. And so we've covered so many just amazing topics. I'm completely blown away. But in these final few minutes, do you think there might be a missing question that I should be asking you? I just don't know what to ask you.
I mean, there could be a lot of things, right, that are out there, but I think this is more of a statement than a question. But you sort of asked this already, which is like, what's next? And the way I like to frame that up is, what's your Everest, right? And so I'm also doing coaching out there. And if anybody wants help on what's their Everest and how do you achieve that and how do you get after it, you should reach out to me on my website. But I'm just so motivated by other people, not just from what I'm doing, because that's my story and that's boring, but what other people are doing, and it doesn't have to be like these flashy things I've been able to achieve. You could be, to be the best podcaster in the world, and you could be trying to achieve being the best woodworker or building houses or whatever you might be doing. But like what doesn't motivate me and motivate me being around other people is when they've got no goals. There's nothing on the agenda. Like, what are you doing? It's like the least passive resistance to get there. So to me, you're living like you're dying. And I like this whole notion about, all these things. Like if you really think about, I've not accomplished very much, right? You might have a different opinion, but like in my head, I haven't because of all these things. I've never ridden an elephant. I've never gone to space. I've never climbed a lot of these mountains that are out there. And so there are so many things that I still need to do, and I feel like I'm running out of time. And that's the reason why I'm just like, I want to stay ready at all times when these things come up, and I get inspired, like, okay, I'm going to go do that. And then, like you said before, you said this, like the tunnel vision of that's the only thing that's on my mind, and that's what I'm going after.
Oh, nice. And it's a fun duality, right? You think about, well, you're in a way never satisfied and always seeking new opportunities, and that's the long term, but in the short term, you have that tunnel vision, you're super focused. Well, you're an amazing man, Mr. Mark. And after this, I need to go and watch that TED Talk. Didn't even know you had one. And as far as those next steps, you said there's Mark Pattison, NFL.com. That last name is Pattison. And we'll have the link to that in the show notes, as well as the link to the documentary, Searching for the Summit. I know you have a podcast. I know you have that book you mentioned, Finding Your Summit, How to Build Resilience and Faith to Rise Above Life's Challenges. So if someone says, I'm excited, but I'm also overwhelmed, where do I go next? What do you think is the logical next step now?
Reach out to me or buy the book. I mean, buying the book or buy it on Audible. And I'm not saying that because I'm this super inspiring person, but I think it's kind of like, let's go back to the tagline that you just wrote. I've had probably more valleys than I've had peaks. And I can say that honestly. And so part of what this book is all about is how I've been able to climb out of it. And the point of the whole story is that because I've had these, it's not just a one trick pony. Like this is the only thing I've ever been doing. And I've had some ups and downs because I've always been a podcaster or something. It's because I've been in media, right? And I've had ups and downs there. And I've climbed mountains. And I've played in the NFL. And I've won this trophy. And I continue to do all this other stuff, this public speaking, and it goes on and on. But one has really nothing to do with the other. And so it's just proof that the system does work if you work the system. And that's the main difference between myself and most others, is that I'm super consistent, I'm super disciplined, and I'm relentless on getting after that. And that's it. No, there's no secret around that.
I love it. So we need to learn from you, and we'll have that link to the Audible directly. That way you can jump on in and work this system. And it's like, I didn't have this aha until my son, he's 6 now, but when he was maybe 1 or 2, I noticed like he was afraid to fail. Like, and we've all gone through it, right? We've all struggled in our lifetime, struggle tying our shoes, struggle walking, struggle speaking. And I just noticed like he was afraid to mess up. And it's like, if we're living our life that way, if the metric is, well, comparing the peaks and the valleys, if we look at how many valleys there are, it's like, that's looking at the wrong goal, right? The goal is to have the peaks despite the valleys, and the number of valleys or the hardships, like it doesn't matter so much as what we then accomplish. And so we need to get trained from you and jump into that Audible. That's Finding Your Summit, How to Build Resilience and Faith to Rise Above Life Challenges, where you examine what happens after success, failure, or loss, when familiar identities fall away and we're forced to redefine who we are. And we've been speaking with Mr. Mark Pattison, who makes... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I need to say you're wrapping this up, which I appreciate. Yeah. I only have one last thing to say on what you said, because this is so important. Like, okay. if only one person is listening to this pod, and we all go through that. We all go through peaks and valleys. We all go through, well, I can do it, and then this guy over here saying you can't, and the inner voice and all that kind of stuff. But going back to your son, yes. Failure is part of success. You will not
Ooh,
succeed unless you fail. And so those two things are intimately tied together, and people need to embrace that when bad things happen. It's all part of a bigger picture.
ooh, that's powerful. Failure is a part of success. Thank you for injecting that in. From Mr. Mark Pattison, he inspires teams and organizations by teaching the mindset, discipline, and resilience that drove him through the NFL, the Seven Summits, winning an Emmy, and taking Sports Illustrated from number 17 to number one. And this is the part of the very end cap of the show, Mr. Mark, where I try to ask about a fun or interesting quote or lesson. So do you think what
Yeah.
we just added there, the failure being part of success, is that a good place to leave things, or do we have one final quote or lesson?
I can give you one more nugget. You ready?
Ooh, a bonus. I'm ready.
All right, here comes the bonus. The bonus is, and now I want you to listen to this. It was said to me by my coach, college coach, a long time ago. And if you really think about this, this is really what, beyond the discipline and the consistency and being relentless and all that stuff, that's just like sugar on top of this cake. But at the core of it, this is the quote: "It takes a little more to make a champion.
Mm.
It takes a little more to make a champion in whatever you do." And then when you sprinkle all those other things that we just talked about in there, amazing things can happen. Amazing things can happen. But you got to kind of have this to have that. And if you have that mindset, if you really think about it, like it's effort, effort, effort. That's one thing in our lives. I can't help. Maybe, I wasn't built 7'4", and so I'm that kid that plays for the Spurs that we just saw, right? Like, but there's one thing that we all have in common, which is effort and choice. And everybody in life has that choice to be bad, to be average, to be good, be great, or be exceptional. That's your choice, right? I choose to be exceptional. And if you're going to be exceptional, it takes a little more to make a champion. And you got to take that effort and level up to make sure you hit that expectation.
Very good. And that's what I'm all about too. Exceptionality and doing the hard work, discipline, consistency, and getting to that next step. And so if you out there want to get to that next step, if you've been kind of having the wrong habits, squandering opportunities, thinking bad of yourself, it's time to get yourself mentally retrained. Listen to that book, Finding Your Summit: How to Build Resilience and Faith to Rise Above Life Challenges, by the inspiring, amazing Mr. Mark Pattison. And then markpattisonnfl.com is a link we'll have under the podcast. So thanks for taking the time, Mr. Mark, and just being an exceptional, amazing, inspiring human being. I'm completely in awe of what you said today and what you do. Thank you for being here.
Right on. Thank you. Appreciate it.